So my video looking at the best fake ADC in Smite from existing abilities did pretty well, and a lot of cool ideas and theories came from that. One of the suggestions I got was to make a fake Standswitcher using only existing Standswitcher abilities. That sounds really fun, so that's what we're doing today. As with the previous video, there are a few ground rules I have to lay out so we know how we're judging these abilities and creating this fake god. The abilities themselves are judged in a vacuum with no synergy or resources from their home kit. Each ability can only go in the slot it is from in the actual god it comes from, so Ula's axe can only go in slot 1 of our fake god, Artio's cripple can only go in slot 2, etc. Also, I'm just going to be ignoring the fact that some of these abilities do magical damage and some do physical, since we'll be combining both damage types here. And finally, for this video specifically, we of course need one actual way to stance switch along with our selected abilities. This holds true for the definition of a stance switcher. They need to have a dedicated way to swap stances. Yamoja's first ability, for example, has 2 different forms, but she isn't technically a stance switcher, so she won't be legal for this video. But speaking of stance switch abilities, let's cover that first. There are 8 stance switchers in Smite right now as of the recording of this video, those being Artio, Cuchulainn, Fafnir, Hel, King Arthur, Merlin, Tyr, and Ula. All of these gods have their own way of stance switching, so the first thing to do in creating our fake stance switcher god is to determine which of these stance switch methods is best in a vacuum. Artio, Hel, and Ula are all fairly similar. They're all ultimate slot stance switchers that give passive benefits. Some are better than others here, but giving up our ultimate slot for no real benefit isn't really ideal, so these 3 are out of the running in my opinion, 5 out of 10. Fafnir is an interesting one. His stance switch is one of only a few that actually does something outside of a passive effect. However, the drawback of this is that he only gets his other stance for a limited time, which just doesn't seem great compared to other options, 6 out of 10. Tyr is very similar to Hel, Artio, and Ula, except he can have an ultimate at the cost of his 3rd slot. This is much stronger because in a vacuum, the god we create could have 2 ultimates. Tyr of course doesn't have 2 ultimates, but there's nothing stopping a fake god that has Tyr's 3 from having a separate ultimate for each stance, which could be really powerful, 7 out of 10. King Arthur and Cuchulainn are the 2 passive stance switchers. These 2 gods give up no actual abilities for their stance switching mechanic, and our god could have 2 full kits with 8 abilities to work with. However, they do have limitations. Where other gods like Ula or Artio can swap stance on command, Cuchulainn must build rage to swap stances and then it's limited time, much like Fafnir's ultimate. And King Arthur has to work with the combo mechanic, which can limit your options a bit. With Arthur, there's also the caveat that all of your abilities are locked to instant cast. Yes, that is specified in the ability description, and so it would be the case for our fake god that will be using that. Cuchulainn, much like Fafnir, has the limited time issue that makes it not amazing, 6 out of 10. Arthur, on the other hand, has potential. Being able to have a full 8 ability kit with the only limitations being instant cast and having to spam abilities is pretty powerful, 8 out of 10. And finally, Merlin. The stance switch itself is pretty mediocre here, doing some damage and a bit of CC, but with a long cooldown of up to 32 seconds. However, Merlin's stance switch mechanic allows us to select 9 different basic abilities from 3 stances. Yes, 9. Merlin only has 6 because his blink cooldown is shared across all stances. However, our fake god wouldn't be limited to that as it's not specified in the ultimate stance switch ability, it's actually listed under the actual 3rd ability itself. So our fake god could have 3 3rd abilities. I'd give Merlin a 9 out of 10. So the front runners here are definitely Arthur and Merlin. The Arthurian bros have the best stance switching mechanics for our purposes. It's 8 abilities, but 2 of them are ultimates, with the limitation of comboing and instant cast, versus 9 abilities but no ultimates, with the limitation of a long cooldown to swap stances. This is actually a really tough choice, but I think I'm going to go with Merlin, mainly because the main benefit of going Arthur is having ultimates, and the only ults we can choose from are his own, Tyr's, and Cuchulainn's, since all other stance switcher ultimates are actually stance changes themselves, and we can only have one of those, which limits our choices. So we've decided on Merlin's Elemental Mastery for our stance switch ability, granting us 3 different stances with 3 basic abilities in each stance. So let's fill those stances with some busted abilities. As I mentioned, each slot can only take abilities that are from that respective slot in the actual game, so any first abilities we take have to be the first abilities of their home god. So with that said, the options for first slot abilities, of which we need to choose the best 3, are Artio's Energy Surge and Maul Prey, Cuchulainn's Barbed Spear and Ground Slam, Fafnir's Cursed Strength both in normal and dragon form, Hel's Decay and Restoration, King Arthur's Overhead Slash and Hamstring, Merlin's Eclipse, Radiate and Frostbolt, Tyr's Fearless in both Assault and Guard stance, and finally Ula's Thrown Axe and Bladed Arrow. So let's get the elephant out of the room here. Fafnir's Dragon Form 1 is obviously making the cut. These abilities are built to be more powerful than normal because he requires his ult to use them and they're limited time. Of course, that's not the case on our Fake God here, but the crazy damage, stun, slow, and protection shred this ability offers is super strong. The rest of these abilities are fairly even in comparison. Fearless, Overhead Slash, Restoration, and Hamstring are all really good, but we have to choose 2 of these. Restoration is my second pick. Having built-in healing into our kit will be very useful, and this ability is pretty versatile, doing good damage to enemies for aggression, but also being able to heal allies too. And finally, I think I'll go with Assault Stance Fearless. Even without the built-in combo of Fearless into Power Cleave for the knockup, this ability still hits for 480 base damage and 100% scaling, and displaces enemies, and also works as a dash. So those are our first abilities: Dragon Form, Curse Strength, Restoration, and Fearless. Let's move on to the second slot. Here we have Cuchulain's Vent Anger, King Arthur's Battle Stomp and Uppercut, Ula's Expose Weakness and Invigorate, Hell's Hinder and Cleanse, Fafnir's Coerce, both in normal and Dragon Form, Merlin's Vortex, Dragonfire and Blizzard, Artio's Entangling Vines and Furious Roar, and finally Tia's Power Cleave in both Assault and Guard Stance. So some of these just aren't very good. A lot of second abilities are weaker or are buffs with stance switches. Once again, Fafnir's Dragon Form Coerce is just an amazing ability when you take it away from the limited time application, so that's my first choice for a second ability. As for the other 2 slots, Tia's Power Cleave in Guard Stance and Merlin's Blizzard are the best and most versatile abilities left, I think. Guard Stance Power Cleave provides some insane healing, plus extra damage and wave clear, and Blizzard is just a solid ability on its own that also gets better with setup CC, which we already have in this god's kit from Fafnir's Dragon Form 1 from earlier. Alright, so far we have Merlin's Ultimate for switching stances, Dragon Form Curse Strength, Restoration, and Fearless as our 3 first abilities, Dragon Form Coerce, Power Cleave in Guard Stance, and Blizzard for our second abilities. Let's finish up this god with our third slots. So the choices for third slot abilities are King Arthur's Twin Cleave and Blade Storm, Fafnir's Underhanded Tactics in both forms, Hell's Repulse and Inspire, Ula's Hail of Arrows and Glory Bound, Cuchulain's Salmon Leap and Furious Charge, Merlin's Flicker, and finally Artio's Life Tap and Heavy Charge. So let's just get this out of the way because I'm sure you all get the idea at this point. Fafnir's Dragon Form 3 is my first choice for our god. It's simply way stronger than most normal abilities due to the nature of Fafnir's design. Having a leap with an instant stun that does tons of damage is an obvious choice. The other 2 choices are a little less obvious though, but I think my picks would be Hell's Inspire for healing and Arthur's Blade Storm for its great damage, knock-up immunity, and some mobility. The picks for third slot are honestly not great and mostly are movement abilities, or in the case of Tia, a stance switch, so this is the best we're going to get. Alright, so now we have all of our abilities and our method of stance switching selected. Let's organise these abilities into 3 stances as best we can. For this, I'm mostly considering synergy between the 3 abilities of each stance, but other things such as having a movement ability in each stance, etc. will be considered too. So to refresh, our first ability options are Fafnir's 1 in Dragon Form, Hell's 1 in Light Stance, and Fearless in Assault Stance. Our second ability choices are Fafnir's 2 in Dragon Form, Power Cleave in Guard Stance, and Blizzard. And our third ability options are Fafnir's 3 in Dragon Form, Blade Storm, and Inspire. So for Arcane Stance, or the first stance, the ability combo I'm going with here is Fafnir's Dragon Form 1, Merlin's Blizzard, and Fafnir's Dragon Form 3. This is going to be our main stance that we like to sit in for the most part. Of course, the idea here is that you drop Blizzard, then chain stun the enemy into it with your 2 Fafnir stuns. This stance also has a great movement option in Fafnir's Dragon 3 to escape or chase kills too. This is definitely going to be our most OP stance. So for Fire Stance, or Stance 2, I decided to go with a more supportive, buff and healing stance. Taking Hell's 1 in Light Stance, Fafnir's Dragon Coerce, and also Hell's 3 in Light Stance. This stance has almost no damage, its only damage source is a single target hit of Hell's Restoration, but it makes up for that by having insane healing and team support. This ability is basically Hell's Light Stance, but with the cleanse replaced with Dragon Coerce to buff the entire team's attack speed and damage. Objectives and sieges are where this stance really shines, as well as out of combat healing in traditional Hell fashion. And Ice, our final stance, is left with Assault Fearless, Guard Power Cleave, and Blade Storm. This is a weird one, mainly because we used a lot of the good abilities and synergies in the other 2 stances. This one is decent for mobility and boxing. It's basically a traditional warrior kit that would be good as a default stance for if this god went solo lane or even potentially jungle, since it has pretty good camp clear and decent gank potential with Assault Fearless, even if we have the wrong power cleave for the combo. But that's our ultimate fake stance switcher. If you enjoyed this theoretical nonsense, then be sure to drop a like before you leave and subscribe to the channel for everything Smite in the future. Let me know your thoughts on this god down below. I think he'd definitely be the best god in the game right now, maybe even the best god ever released, but that's not certain with how OP release Guan was. But yeah, catch you guys later in another video. Have a great day, stay safe, and peace out you nerds.